So the first thing people want to know when they meet me is, how tall are you? The answer to that is I'm 6'6", but I'm 6'9" in heels. And one of the problems with growing up tall and growing up poor, I grew up in a trailer park in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So when you grow up tall, my trailer park people out there, you heard that. It's no fair to do that to my Wisconsin people, but it's fun. When you grow up tall and you grow up poor, you grow up faster than your family's ability to get you pants, right? So I always had high water pants or floods. My pants never made it all the way down to the floor, and my mom knew that. She knew I got teased at school. She didn't want me to feel bad. She told me they were capri pants, and they were coming back in style. That turned out to be a lie. I'm 6'6". My wife of 22 years is 5'3". If you wonder how that works, just realize that in our relationship, deodorant is much more important than breath mints. Notice how that took some people longer than others, right? Like some people got that straight out of the gate. Other people needed a moment to work that through, do a little humor math. So it's good to be tall. It's good to be tall. We pay tall people more than we pay smaller people for the same work. It's not fair, but we do it. Don't be mad at tall people. Small people pay tall people more for the same work. We're not doing it for each other. They do scientific studies and have people guess other people's IQ, and people of all sizes guess that tall people are smarter than they actually are. I think we are smarter, but science, disagrees with me. And so we tend to vote for the taller people in elections. For example, in the presidential election, there's only been a few times in the history of the United States where we voted for the smaller person for president. So it's good to be tall, until it's not good to be tall. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is not a hub for any major airline, and I fly about 200,000 miles a year. And because Raleigh is not a major hub, it means I start every flight on what's called a regional jet. Okay, this is like a Fisher-Price airplane. This is not a real airplane. And the flight always starts the same way. I go to get on the plane, the flight attendant sees me, she always says the same thing: "Sir, you need to watch your head," which is hard to do if you've ever tried. And I get on the airplane like this, right? And some of you are like, "Whatever, Dave, we've ducked before." You have, but you're used to re-emerging on the other side, okay? I don't get to re-emerge. I just shuffle like a hobbit back to my seat. But I fly a lot, so I get the first class upgrade, I get the exit row, I get the economy comfort seat, whatever. I'm fine once I sit down. But sooner or later, when you fly a lot, you got to go to the bathroom. And if you don't fit in the middle of the plane, that's the pinnacle, that's the peak. You certainly don't fit on the side of the plane where they put these bathrooms. And some people have accused me of exaggeration, which is why I took the liberty of an airplane bathroom selfie. It can be hard to get oriented, so let me help you with what's happening here. This is the ceiling of the airplane bathroom. This is my shoulder on the ceiling of the airplane bathroom. And it's not even the top, it's the side of my shoulder on the ceiling of the airplane bathroom. Brian didn't say it in the introduction because he knew you wouldn't get it, but he walked up to me and he goes, "Dave, every time I'm in an airplane bathroom now, I think about you." And that's because of this next story. So what happens is I get in the bathroom and I close the door behind me because I can't turn around to do it, and I try to latch it, but I can't be sure. Maybe someone will come for a visit. And so I'm here and the toilet's over there. I have things that need to go in the toilet. And so I need to get closer. And so the obvious move is to get closer, but the ceiling goes like this. And so as I try to move closer, it just pushes my face closer and closer, closer and closer to the toilet. That's not what I'm looking for. So I've developed something I call the limbo yoga approach. What I do is I press my face into the ceiling, and then I try to form my upper body to the shape of the side of the airplane. It's just matching that shape, which allows me to then move my lower body in and rotate. Now, the problem is there's not a lot of visual information now about what's about to happen, but I'm a problem solver. And so there's a mirror in every bathroom, and so I thought if I can get a reflection, if I can get sort of a sense, it's like triangulation. This is basic science. This is GPS. This is what this is. And But as I was looking down, I'm looking in the mirror, I realized, wait a second, there's a sink right there. Yeah. That is a whole lot higher and a whole lot closer. That seems custom designed for what needs to happen next. That's the tall man's urinal is what that is. That's ergonomically designed for my comfort is what that's just what happened there. Now, some of you will be traveling home by bus now, right? Like, I'm not. Now I have to buy an RV like John Madden and travel around the country by ground. So it's important to realize something about that story. As people misunderstand that story, a guy came up to me, Charleston, South Carolina, came up to me after the talk. He goes, Dave, I know what you mean about those airplane bathrooms. He goes, I'm a big guy. He goes, I don't even try for the toilet anymore. I just go right in the sink every time. And I was like, you're disgusting. You got confused. That was a true story that I turned into a funny story. I don't pee in the sink. I'm not an animal. I go all over the wall like a normal person does. Because I'm classy. So that's sort of a good news, bad news situation, right? I don't go in the sink, but apparently other people do, right? Like that's what we all grew a little bit in that moment that we learned that was the case. And so there's a moral to that story. You think there can't possibly be, but there is. There's a purpose to that story, and it's this. I don't get to accept the advantages of my height, we just talked about them, without also accepting what? The disadvantages. Right? If people say, Dave, is it good or bad to be tall? The answer is yes. Every characteristic that we have is a strength and a weakness at the same time. It has a downside and an upside. There's no good and bad. There are things that are good and bad, right? Good and bad. When I was a kid, I was always in trouble for being bad. I couldn't sit still, be quiet, or do what I was told. Teachers called me obnoxious, rebellious, inappropriate, immature, told me I had no self-discipline, no self-control, and if I didn't fix those things, I was going to end up homeless and living in a van down by the river, right? Sooner or later, they give up on me. They'd send me to the principal's office. I remember I was in third grade, so I was 8 years old. They sent me to the principal's office. He sat me down in his lap, which seems questionable now, looking back on it. Pro tip during HR evaluation time, right? Just keep the people on the other side during annual evaluations. Keep them on the other side of the desk. But he told me a story about 3 kinds of bad people. He said, Dave, there's bad people, really bad people, people who are too far gone. I'm like, this is not a good story. It doesn't even have good people in it. He said, you're a really bad kid on the verge of being too far gone. You need to learn to sit still, be quiet, and do what you're told. And he was trying to help me because he had a world view that said sitting still, being quiet, and doing what you're told are simple and fundamental skills. And if you can't do the simple and fundamental, you'll never be able to do the complex and difficult things that life requires. He was trying to help me by teaching me what his parents, his teachers, and his employers had taught him, which is that you need to fix what's wrong with you in order to be successful. And I'm not the only one who had trouble at school. Ken Robinson said many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think they're not because the thing they were good at school wasn't valued or was actually stigmatized. Language is really important, and he didn't say many highly talented, brilliant, and creative people thought they weren't. He said, think they're not. That means they're 20 now, they're 30 now, they're 40 now, they're 50 now, they're 60 now, and they still don't know they're brilliant, talented, and creative. And there's a huge opportunity for people like you in this, to help those people discover that, and that's what I want to give you the opportunity to do tonight. Because many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think they're not because the thing they were good at school wasn't valued or was actually stigmatized. The thing they were good at, their strength, wasn't valued, it was ignored or denied, or it was actually stigmatized. We told them that the best thing about them, their brilliance, their talent, their creativity, was the worst thing about them. And for a lot of them, they still believe that's true. And that's what I realized as an adult. I was always in trouble because I couldn't sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told. And now I get paid to do 3 things. I get paid to stand up, not to sit down. I get paid to talk, not to be quiet. I get paid to run my own business, not to do what other people tell me to do. Every one of my biggest weaknesses turned out to be one of my biggest strengths. But I didn't know that. The people around me didn't know that. No one who was trying to help me knew that. My parents my whole life called me motor mouth because I talk too much. And the nickname was designed to shame me. It wasn't cute. It was designed to shame me into shutting up. If you ask my parents, they had one goal in life: get me to sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told. Now I'm a professional speaker. 2 years ago, I bought my parents a house with the money that I make as a professional speaker. If you talk to my parents now, they have a different story. Like, we always just knew Dave was special. You know, we just knew of all our 4 kids, Dave was the one who was going to do amazing things. That Dave, we just always were telling him, you go, Dave. You're just yourself. You just do that. We put no limits on him. We did not beat him half to death, right? They have a different memory, sort of what happened, right? And that's where I realized this truth. I realized it first in myself. What makes us weird also makes us wonderful. What makes us weak also makes us strong. And I started to wonder if that was true for other people, whether it was true for organizations, whether it was true for places. And I discovered that it was, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And I have a larger model, but we're going to kind of scale it down today. And one of the key principles is appreciation, that we succeed because of our weaknesses, not in spite of them. It's not that we're overcoming them to succeed. It's recognizing that we don't need to overcome them in order to succeed. We actually appreciate the things that people are telling us are wrong with them. And a simple example of this is dyslexia. George Eliot said, every limit is a beginning as well as an ending. And I want to show you the beginnings that come with the limits that we have. And so dyslexia means you struggle to read and you struggle to write. And if you struggle to read and write, you're going to struggle in school. And we've all been taught that if you struggle in school, you'll struggle in life, right? Which is why they were really surprised when they were studying millionaires in the United Kingdom and discovered that 50%, half of the millionaires in their study had dyslexia, even though only 10% of the people in the general population have dyslexia. They were studying entrepreneurs in the United States and discovered that 35% of the entrepreneurs in their study had dyslexia, even though only 10% of people in the general population have dyslexia. Ingvar Kamprad is the billionaire founder of IKEA. He has dyslexia. Richard Branson is the billionaire founder of the Virgin series of companies. He has dyslexia. And they actually asked him one time, how has dyslexia affected your success? And he said, strangely, I think my dyslexia has helped. See, what scientists are starting to realize is people with dyslexia don't have broken brains, they have different brains. And the same brain that causes them to struggle in school causes them to succeed in life at a higher level than most other people ever will. There was another guy, his name was Paul Orfila. He got kicked out of 4 high schools because of dyslexia and ADHD, so he went to work for family-owned businesses, got fired by his own mom and dad from family-owned businesses. So he started his own business. He called it something you may have heard of called Kinko. It's just a little thing that he did there in California. He recently sold it to FedEx for $2.4 billion. And here's the essence of appreciation. Here's what he said. He said, I think everyone should have dyslexia, right? You guys were putting up Drucker quotes earlier, and I cut one of them because of time, but I'm going to put it back in. Peter Drucker said, strong people always have strong weaknesses too. Where there are peaks, there are valleys. Strong people always have strong weaknesses too, where there are peaks or valleys. And appreciation is Paul Orfila realizing if I took away the valley, I'd lose the peak. If I took away the disadvantage, I'd lose the advantage. If you take away my weakness, I lose my strength. They're connected. I can't have one without the other, and I appreciate that. I feel wonderful, even though other people call it weird. I feel strong, even though people call me weak. I appreciate the whole of who I am instead of wishing I was something else. And so what do we do? Right? What do we do with this information? If we can see ourselves and other people differently, if we can see the strength where we used to see weakness, how do we change our behavior? How do we manage people differently? How do we manage our own life differently? How do we manage our own relationships differently? How do we parent our children differently? The first step is amplification. We exaggerate weaknesses instead of eliminating them. We turn up the volume instead of turning it down. Now that sounds ridiculous, right? So let me give you an example. Jimmy Kimmel's a late-night talk show ho. He's not a late-night talk show ho. I don't think that's a thing. Seems rude. Late-night talk show host. He has his own television show. He was recently asked to host the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and at one point he walked up to the podium and seemed to be getting very, very serious. And he leaned in and he said, I just want to thank Mr. Mills, my 10th grade history teacher, who told me that I would never amount to anything if I didn't stop screwing around. Mr. Mills, I'm about to high-five the President of the United States. And then he did, putting this woman in the most awkward picture of all time. And then he came back to the podium and he said, "Suck it, Mills." And I'm not here to be down on teachers. Mr. Mills was telling him what his teachers, his parents, and his employers had told him about success. He was trying to help Jimmy when he told him, "You'll never amount to anything." That's harsh. Unless you stop. He didn't tell him to dial it back. He told him to shut it off. Unless you stop screwing around. What's important to understand is, how did Jimmy Kimmel succeed? He went pro at screwing around. Okay? He went full time. He became more childish, more silly, more immature, more ridiculous. He made a living doing the thing that Mr. Mills told him to completely stop doing. Okay? That's amplification. I'm a public speaker after being told my whole life that I needed to be quiet. I get paid to do the thing that people spent their entire life trying to stop me from doing. Not doing it a little bit more, doing it for a living. How could you amplify your weakness? See, people will tell you, "I love it that you're so intense, but if you could just dial it back a little bit. I love it that you're so organized, but if you could just dial it back a little bit. I love it that you're so sensitive, but if you could just dial it back a little bit." And what you need to think in those moments is, I'm not going to dial it back, I'm going to turn it to 11. It's not about moderating it. That's not where success happens. Success happens when you, and even think about it. I love it that you're intense, but if you could dial it back, what happens when you dial back intensity? It stops being intensity. Right? That's what the word means. Right? We need to turn up the volume when people are telling us to turn it down. What makes us weird also makes us wonderful. If we believed that, we'd be looking for opportunities to get weirder. What makes us weak also makes us strong. If we believe that, we'd be looking for opportunities to get even weaker in some areas so we could get stronger in others. The next step is alignment. Some of you are like, "I don't know if that's going to work for me to achieve the goals that I have." But I think we need to stop trying to fit in and start trying to find the right fit. If you're saying, "Well, I have to fix some of my weaknesses in order to get where I want to go," then what I'm challenging you to think about is that the right place for you to go? Or should you be pursuing something that doesn't require such a massive change in the fundamental nature of who you are? So when I was a kid, not only did I go to school with capri pants, I had 4x6 iron-on patches on my pants when I would get holes in my knees, and I knew that wasn't cool, mostly when the kids at school told me that's not cool. And so I got a job delivering newspapers at 5 o'clock every morning. There's some young people in the audience, so I just want to take a moment of newspapers, and we used to take the internet and write it down on a piece of paper, take it to people in their homes every single day, and then the next day we would write a new internet, and then we would take it to their house again. We did this every day, 7 days a week. Really early in the morning. And so I was 12 years old, and I was trying to make some money to pay for my own pants that made it all the way down to the floor, and I fell off my bike. And I broke my left forearm right in the middle, compound break of both bones, to the point that the lower part of my forearm came up at a 90-degree angle to the rest of my forearm. I was so young, they didn't want to do surgery, so they put me in traction, put me in a cast for 3 months because it was going to take a very long time for the bones to heal. They took me out 3 months later, told me I was fine. And 8 years later, when I was 20 years old, I was in college, and my friend Carl was playing the guitar, and I wanted to learn how to play the guitar. He tried to show me how to play the guitar. I could not do anything that he showed me. He thought I was stupid. I thought I was stupid. And then we realized they put me back together wrong at the hospital. You should be able to do this. It's called supination, palm flat to the ceiling. You should be able to do this. It's called pronation, palm flat to the floor. Okay? I can do pronation. I can't do supination. I can't even come close. Put me back together wrong at the hospital, and in that moment, I had a realization about why I had struggled at the drive-thru for so many years. I thought everybody was struggling at the drive-thru, but it was only me. I thought we were in this together, right? I thought this was a common struggle that humanity had, but apparently it was just me, because I can give them the money just fine. That's not the problem. But when they go to give me the change, all I've got is this, right? And they're like, "Sir, you just got to turn your hand over." And I'm like, "Okay." They're like, "No, but you've got to reach it out." And I'm like, "I was," right? My sister-in-law said I should get a basket on a stick and just reach it in there. Just put it in the basket. But it gets worse, because a few years ago I was training for a marathon. I got hit by a truck that was going 50 miles an hour. I was not going nearly that fast. And he hit me in my left elbow, same arm, hit me in my left elbow, hit me so hard he didn't break the bones, he sheared them off. So this time they did do surgery, and they took 2 giant screws and they screwed them all the way through my left arm, and we did extensive physical therapy. But even with extensive physical therapy, I'll never be able to extend my left arm fully. And so I'm tall, we talked about that. But I'm tall in the sense that a Tyrannosaurus Rex is tall, right? I don't have the wingspan that you would expect from a person of my height. That was a long way for some of you to go to find out why I have a dinosaur on my shirt, right? You're like, is he 9 years old or what's happening here? And there's a moral to that story, and the moral of that story is this. I've been speaking in Australia for years, 12 straight years. I've spoken all over the country, and the first place that I drove in Australia when I was driving a car by myself was where? McDonald's, right? Because in Australia, they drive on the left-hand side of the road, so they drive on the right-hand side of the car. And I wanted to know what it felt like to reach my arm out, fully extended and perfectly flat, and accept that change and bring it safely back into the vehicle like all of you have been taking for granted for so many years. And here's the moral to that story. When I'm in Australia, my arm is still broken in two different ways. I still have a weakness. I still have a disability, but it doesn't matter because I'm in a different situation. I haven't changed who I am. I've changed where I am. I haven't changed the person. I've changed the place. These situations are powerful, and they can either put the spotlight on the best things about us, or they can put the spotlight on the worst things about us. And what smart people do and what smart managers do is they try to find the right situations for themselves. They try to find and create the right situations for others, the kind of situations that put the spotlight on the strengths and take the spotlight off the weaknesses. You don't get rid of the weaknesses. You make them irrelevant. Not by changing who people are, but by changing where they are. There's a company called Specialisterne in Denmark. They do software testing. They hire people with autism on purpose because two of the symptoms of autism are hyperfocus and doing the same thing over and over again. Now, this is going to sound really normal, but imagine hiring people based on their symptoms. Okay? That's not a thing we do. At Specialisterne, they hire people because they need people to do software testing who have what? Hyperfocus and do the same thing over and over again. They hire people because of their disability, not in spite of it, and because the disability is a competitive advantage inside the organization. So much so that SAP saw, the global software giant SAP saw what Specialisterne was doing, and now they're looking for hundreds of people with autism from all over the world to join their organization to do software testing because they're now seeing a strength where everyone else saw what? Saw weakness. When we find the right fit, when we find the right place, when we create the right place, when we stop thinking about who and we start thinking about where, it changes everything. How can you find the right fit? How can you create the right fit for your kids? How can you create the right fit for your employees? How can you create the right fit for your spouse or partner? How can you make sure you're creating the right fit for yourself? And the last step is affiliation. Well, somebody's got to do this thing, and I don't want to do it. It's not alignment for me, right? It doesn't allow me to amplify. That's what affiliation's for. We need to partner with people who are strong where we're weak. Paul Orfalea can't read and write, and yet he ran a company worth $2.4 billion. How did he do it? He hired people who could. Okay. And ask yourself a question for a second. What happens to a culture when a CEO can admit to the people that work for him, I can't read and write, so I need you to do it for me? On the board, it says that it's good to be vulnerable, right? Vulnerability is sexy. Is it sexy? Yeah, damn. Sexy to be vulnerable. What happens when the CEO, guess what? When the CEO says, I can't read or write, then when somebody gets a task that requires them to be super organized and they're not organized, guess what they feel free to say? I'm not super organized, so I'd rather not do that. Because guess what? The CEO can't be like, you're fired. You're like, you're illiterate, right? Like, that's not an argument. Like, disorganization's down here, like illiteracy, that's pretty serious. I don't know. Do you even understand the words? Right, that's not illiteracy. See, I know that. Okay. But I told you that story, but if you've got a kid, if you've got a son or a daughter who struggles to read and write, you don't introduce them to your friend's billionaire in training right here, right? We're just going to outsource that reading stuff. We're not worried about it, right? It's hard to affiliate because some things seem like stuff you just have to have, and that's why I chose reading and writing for my example. There's nothing that you have to have, but in business we call it collaboration when you partner with people who are strong where you're weak. In school, if you partner with people who are strong where you're weak, what do they call it? Cheating. So we grow up in a world that teaches us that an essential life skill is fundamentally wrong, and you have to be able to do everything by yourself or else you're going to be an unsuccessful person. There's another reason we don't partner with people who are strong where we're weak, and it's because we don't see that people are strong where we're weak. We see that they're weak where we are strong. We don't see that they have what we're missing. We see that they're missing what we have. Sometimes the people we need the most are the people we like the least. At my house, I try to stay hydrated because of my activities, my athletic activities. And if I'm drinking a glass of water here, 3/4 full, delicious and refreshing, but I want to do other things, I set it down. And that's my first mistake. I've lost physical contact with the beverage. Okay. Then I get involved in my activity. That's the second mistake. I've lost visual contact with the beverage. And when I get done with what I'm doing and I realize I'm thirsty and I go back to the beverage, can anybody tell me where it is? Because it's not there. It's in the dishwasher. It's in the sink. If it's a bottle, it's in the trash. And when I ask my wife where it is, does my wife calmly explain to me what happened? No, she loses her mind, right? I don't know where it is. There's bottles and cans and cups and mugs all over this house, and some of them have been around for 3 weeks, and they have stuff growing in them, and nobody helps around here except me. And maybe I did throw away your water, but maybe if I did, you could just go ahead and get another one. Whoa. Settle down, right? And by the way, that works perfectly. When someone's losing their mind and you tell them to settle down, they just go straight. Oh, it just brings that. I mean, I studied psychology. That's just a tip you can bank on. You just and use motion. Settle down, right? And then they realize what an idiot they're being, right? Make sure the nonverbals communicate a total lack of respect for them as a person. And that really helps. They're like, oh, I didn't realize I was being unreasonable. Thank you for mirroring back to me my ridiculous, This is just psychology 101. I shouldn't even have to spend time on that. But so why have I been married for 22 years to a woman who steals my beverages? Okay? I realized at my house, the only way to stay hydrated, I have to have a Camelback backpack, right, with a straw that comes up to my mouth. I bought the Camelback at REI, by the way. A Camelback backpack. Yeah. So why are we still together? Here's why. Because there's another side to the story, isn't there? See, my wife was in Guatemala a few months ago on a missions trip, and my kids needed a couple AA batteries. And I called her in Guatemala. Honey, where's the AA batteries? She said, you go down the hall to the right, third shelf in the back. There's a plastic tub labeled batteries right next to the plastic tub labeled label maker. I got them at the Container Store. Yeah. I know where I am. All right. And then she said, in the back of the tub is where we have the AA batteries. There's 5 AA batteries. There are 3 of them are Energizer, 2 are Duracell. Be careful, one of the Duracells is rechargeable. And at that moment, I'm not mad at my wife anymore, am I? I'm thinking to myself, I am so damn hot for you right now. I don't know what to do. My wife is inflexible because she's what? Because she's structured and organized. There's a weakness, there's a frustration, but there's also a big strength. And when I can be aware of her strengths and weaknesses, when I can accept her strengths and weaknesses, when I can appreciate her strengths and weaknesses, it frees me up to affiliate with her, to partner with her, and now I can have a more organized life without being more organized. I can be more well-rounded and well-balanced without being more well-rounded and well-balanced because I'm connected to somebody who has something I don't have, and I'm mature enough to appreciate that in them instead of pointing out the things that are negative about that characteristic. You guys are loving some Peter Drucker, so here's some more. Organizations exist to make people's strengths effective and their weaknesses irrelevant. Right? Is that what we're doing, right? Organization, and now we love that first part. Okay, we're going to build on people's strengths, but sometimes we're like, but you got to be better at that. Well, that's just a non-negotiable. Well, we just need people. No, it says to make their weaknesses irrelevant. It didn't say to fix their weaknesses. It said to make their weaknesses irrelevant, to design situations that make their weaknesses irrelevant. Organizations, our schools should do this too, by the way. Our marriages should do this too. When we parent our children, our families should be doing this too, but we're oftentimes not, aren't we? So we got to wrap it up. So who's strong where you're weak, right? And the quick answer to that is whoever's bothering you the most in your organization right now is probably strong where you're weak. Because the very thing that frustrates you about them is your big picture, and they're always digging into the details, and you're like, come on. Guess what frustrates them about you is that you're always big picture and never on the details, right? So let's wrap it up. This is the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Quick story, it's leaning. That's what's wrong with it. Since 1173, 844 years it's been leaning. But in the 1930s, Mussolini, who was the tourism director of Italy at the time, well, he was everything. He was a dictator. So he decided that this was a scar on the reputation of his country, that it made Italians look incompetent as builders and as a civilization. And so he ordered his government engineers to fix it, and they tried and they failed, which was a really lucky thing for the city of Pisa. Because you see, millions of people have traveled millions of miles and spent millions of dollars to see what? A tower that leans. And if you don't believe me, let's talk about what this building is called, right? We don't know, and you're smart people because nobody cares about that building. It's beautiful, it's antique, and it's properly built. It's not about to fall down, and nobody cares. You didn't even know it was there. It gets cropped out like a bad ex-boyfriend in pictures. And the people who run the tower now finally figured that out, and they said this: because of its inclination, the tower has become the object of very special attention. That's what I'm telling you. It's because of your inclination, because of your kids' inclination, because of your employees' inclination, because of your business partners' inclination. It's because of your business's inclination. I'm working on a new book, and we won't get into that, but recently I heard a story. Snapchat's doing pretty well right now, if you didn't notice, and some people invested a couple dollars in them recently. When the Snapchat founder presented his idea to the MBA class that he was in at the time, they say, "We'd love it, except for the part where the pictures disappear." That's some amazing advice, right? If he would have listened to them, that would have been something like a $3.5 billion mistake. And if it wouldn't have had the pictures disappear, what would it have been just like? Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and on and on. The thing about Snapchat was the pictures disappear. It's because of its inclination that the tower has become the object of very special attention. It's true for people, it's true for organizations. And the people who run it now say it's important to keep the current tilt, and that's my message to you today. In your kids, in your employees, in yourself, in your spouse, in your partner, find that inclination, preserve that tilt because it's vital, absolutely vital. You were talking a lot about mission earlier today, and that was really getting me pumped up, but here's my mission. Here's my purpose. E.E. Cummings said, "We do not believe in ourselves until someone reveals that deep inside of us something is valuable, worth listening to, worthy of our trust, sacred to our touch." My mission in life is to show people that deep inside of them something is valuable. The very thing that other people have been spending their entire life telling them is the most worthless thing about them. It's not only not worthless, it's worth listening to, it's worthy of our trust, it's sacred to our touch. And here's what I hope happens today. I hope you hear this and you see yourself differently, but more than that, I hope you see your partner differently, and you see your employees differently, and you see the managers of your organization differently, and you see your organization itself differently. And that you walk away from here and you become a person. What did you say earlier? That the goal is to elevate humanity? That you become a person who reveals to other people that deep inside of them something is valuable, worth listening to, worthy of our trust, sacred to our touch. I don't know that there's any higher purpose that we have, and any better way that we can elevate humanity than to reveal to people that deep inside of them something is valuable, worth listening to, worthy of our trust, sacred to our touch. Because I believe that what makes us weird also makes us wonderful, and what makes us weak also makes us strong. Thank you very much.